In the spring of 1925, a man in a fine suit sold the Eiffel Tower. It was not his to sell. He sold it anyway, for scrap metal, to a Paris businessman who was too ashamed to ever tell a soul. So the story goes, the seller waited a month, watched the newspapers, and heard nothing. And then he did the only logical thing. He came back to Paris, and he sold it again. Here is the strangest part. Search every courthouse in France, and you will not find this crime. No complaint, no file, no trial. The most famous con in history exists only as a story. But the man was real, and the record did catch him, in the end, for something else entirely. This is the case of Victor Lustig, a self-styled count with, by some tallies, more than 40 aliases and dozens of arrests that never stuck. The man behind the legend of the Eiffel Tower sale, the money box, and the con that fooled Al Capone. And the man the United States Secret Service finally broke with a single small key. It is a story about the difference between the legend and the record, because they are two different men. Start with the name, because even that is not settled. He is usually reported as Victor Lustig, born in 1890 in a small town in Bohemia. But the files of Alcatraz would one day carry him as Robert V. Miller. Other papers say Miller or Molnar or Möller. His modern biographer found a man whose origins simply refused to be confirmed. He was, by every account, brilliant. Fluent in about 5 languages. Educated, charming, immaculate. A thin scar on his left cheek and the manners of minor royalty. He called himself Count Lustig, and people believed him because he looked like the kind of man who would not need to lie. He learned his trade, reportedly, on the transatlantic ocean liners, playing cards with rich passengers who never asked why the charming Count kept winning. By the early 1920s, he was working America with a signature prop, a polished mahogany box fitted with slots and little brass cranks. He called it a money box. Feed in a genuine bill, wait 6 hours for the chemistry to work, and the machine would print you a perfect copy. It worked because it was preloaded with real bills. The mark watched real money come out, paid a reported $10,000 to $30,000 for the machine, and discovered hours or days later that he had bought a piece of furniture. The 6-hour delay was not a flaw. It was the head start. And then, the story goes, came Paris. In 1925, the Eiffel Tower was 36 years old, and it was rusting. It had been built as a temporary structure for a World's Fair, and the newspapers openly wondered how long the city could afford to keep it. Repainting it alone cost a fortune. Lustig, the story goes, read those articles and saw what no one else saw. The city half expected the tower to come down. All the con had to do was make the rumor official. He had stationery forged, heavy official paper, carrying the crest of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs, the real government department responsible for the tower. On that paper, he became its deputy director general. He took a suite at the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the grandest addresses in Paris, and invited 5 or 6 scrap metal dealers to a confidential meeting. The government, he told them, had made a painful decision. The tower was too expensive to maintain and would be quietly sold for scrap. Over 7,000 tons of iron. Nothing could be announced, nothing could be verified because the matter was politically sensitive. Secrecy was not suspicious. Secrecy was the point. Then he chose his buyer. Not the richest man in the room, the hungriest. André Poisson was an outsider, a provincial dealer who wanted to matter in Paris. And when Poisson hesitated, the story goes, Lustig produced his masterstroke. He asked for a bribe. A ministry man's salary was small, he confided. Surely a gentleman about to receive such a contract could help. And the doubt in Poisson's mind dissolved, because a corrupt official asking for a kickback was, in 1925, more believable than an honest one. Poisson paid for the tower, reported at around 70,000 francs. Then he paid the bribe on top. 2 payments for a monument that was never for sale. And then Poisson did exactly what the con was designed to make him do. Nothing. To report the crime was to tell Paris he had bought the Eiffel Tower from a stranger in a hotel room. His shame was the getaway car. A month later, the story goes, having heard nothing in the papers, Lustig came back and ran the identical scheme on a fresh set of dealers. This time, one of them went to the police, and the Count was gone on a ship to America before anyone could touch him. Now stop, because here the episode has to tell you the truth about itself. Everything you have just heard, the crayon, the letterhead, poisson, the bribe, the second sale, none of it was ever tested in a courtroom. No French court heard the case, the victim never filed. The detailed story surfaced decades later in a book written by a former Secret Service man in 1961. That does not mean it is false, it means it is a story. And a story with no court record could grow as perfect as its teller wanted it to be. One famous tale even has him conning Al Capone, taking $50,000 for an investment, holding it untouched for 2 months, and handing it all back, so that Capone would trust him and reward his honesty. It was never prosecuted. It is characterization, not record. So what does the record actually say about Victor Lustig? The record says he was arrested again and again under name after name, and that almost nothing stuck. And the record says that in the 1930s, the greatest talker in America stopped conning people one at a time. He started attacking the money itself. With a Nebraska engraver named William Watts, a craftsman of unusual skill, Lustig sat at the center of a counterfeiting operation that fed near-perfect fake bills into circulation for roughly 5 years. Tens of thousands of dollars a month, by some estimates approaching $100,000 at its peak. The Secret Service, whose oldest job is protecting the currency, came to call the notes Lustig money, and they ranked it among the most dangerous counterfeit in America. On the 10th of May 1935, agents finally took him on Broadway in New York City. Decades of aliases, dozens of arrests, and almost no convictions. What broke the pattern was not a confession, and not a witness. It was a key, a small locker key with a number penciled on it, found in his wallet. The key opened a locker in the Times Square subway station. Inside were $51,000 in counterfeit bills, and the engraving plates. The great talker was, for once, attached to physical evidence, and then his engraver agreed to testify against him. Even then, Lustig had one performance left. On the 1st of September 1935, the day before his trial was due to open, he escaped the federal detention headquarters in Manhattan. In daylight, on a rope of knotted bedsheets out of an upper window, reportedly pausing to wipe at the panes as he went down so that the street below saw nothing but a window washer. He was free for 27 days. They took him again in Pittsburgh. And in December 1935, the man of 40 aliases ran out of stories. He pleaded guilty, 15 years for the counterfeiting, 5 more for the escape, 20 years. He arrived at Alcatraz in the spring of 1936, inmate number 300. The register did not even say Victor Lustig. It said Robert V. Miller. The legend went into the rock under someone else's name. He spent about a decade there. He reportedly filed complaint after complaint about his health, and the guards, who had heard every story from every conman, dismissed them. Eventually, the illness was real. He was transferred to the Federal Prison Hospital at Springfield, Missouri, and on the 11th of March 1947, he died in custody. Pneumonia, some accounts adding a brain abscess. His death, reportedly, went almost unnoticed for 2 years. On the death certificate, a clerk filled in the occupation of the deceased, apprentice salesman. And that is the final joke of the file. The most famous crime he ever committed exists in no court record on earth. The Eiffel Tower sale lives only in the telling, perfect and unprovable, exactly as a con man would want it. The record knows a different man. Not the Count in the gilded suite, but a counterfeiter with a penciled key in his wallet, who died in prison under a borrowed name, ranked by the state as a trainee in sales. The legend sold the Eiffel Tower twice. The record only ever convicted him of making money. Under oath, only one of those men exists. The record does not care which one you prefer.